welcome. I'm Donna Montes, Chief Executive Officer for CIS Southeast Harris in Brazoria County, and I'm very pleased to be your host for our third and final day together at this year's Leadership Town Hall. We have had 2 days filled with learning, listening, sharing, and growing, and we have another great day in store for us all. But before we get started, I wanted to draw your attention to a few things. First, if you are looking for PowerPoints or session resources from any of the breakout sessions, you can access them from the breakout session room by clicking the monitor labeled Resources. And in celebration of our National Hispanic Heritage Month, we're excited to share a featured fireside chat with our CEO, Ray Saldana, and Congressman Joaquin Castro. During this chat, Ray and Congressman Castro engage in a dialogue around their educational journeys as immigrant youth and how they are now working to disrupt and create opportunities for all children to thrive and experience a quality education. You can view this featured chat in the Network Lounge under On-Demand Content. Also, I wish to remind everyone that live breakout sessions are next, and after that, we will wrap up the live learning content for the week. All of the live sessions from this week have been recorded and will be available in the virtual environment starting October 7th through October 31st. Starting in November, the recordings can be found on the new CIS community. If you're unfamiliar with the CIS community, we've uploaded some helpful documents in your electronic briefcase to learn more about it. Lastly, remember, we have one more iPad to give away, so be sure to engage with the leaderboard to become a winner. Wait, did I say lastly? No, okay, I was just kidding. To help us improve upon future events, we ask that you complete the final event survey that will be emailed to you following the close of this event. Our friends at the National Office are eager to hear your feedback. And now you know, National is always eager to hear feedback to know what worked well and what could be improved. As you've heard from my co-host, each of the days in our Leadership Town Hall was developed with an overall focus. Day 1 was focused on equity, and day 2 was focused on alumni. And today's focus is system change. In his opening remarks, our national president and CEO, Ray Saldana, described this focus when he said, "We must do more than just reopen the old system. We have the opportunity to build a better one, a more equitable system of public education in America." So this idea of big change, building new and better systems is what the majority of today's sessions will emphasize on. So to help put that in context for all of us in the network, I'd like to share with you a little bit about our work at CIS Southeast Harris in Brazoria County to change the trajectory of our organization, to implement a comprehensive organizational-wide shift in our practices and our culture. As a servant leader, my goal is to put our employees' needs first, to empower them to serve each student and family to the best of their ability. To build and reinforce this service mindset across the organization, we began with the administrative staff. We needed to meet more often and more regularly, so we held weekly administrative meetings to make sure that the directors had what was necessary to support the site staff. We provided leadership and team building book studies and reinforced personnel and professional learning and growth. To put more focus on team building and goal setting, we implemented administrative retreats, and I added new positions to support the growth of the agency and to make sure that the directors had the necessary time to devote to the staff and the families in need. We created new support systems and processes to allow all to serve our students and families more efficiently. The administrative team was spread out geographically, and it was really difficult to be supportive of their needs because they were so far apart. But we were able to bring all 3 small offices into one central office. And this was one of the most effective things that we did to build a cohesive team. We also needed to include the input and opinions of our site staff as we moved forward in this new trajectory. We began asking them about issues that they struggled with and began to align training with how to combat those struggles. We shifted from training for sake of training to training with a purpose. We implemented staff satisfaction surveys and asked for suggestions on how to improve our processes. Directors began making more campus visits to focus on issues associated with particular locations. And we had smaller monthly team meetings in order for us to be able to connect better. The board of directors were key in helping us to make this shift. We needed to be sure that the board was focused on the same goals and understanding as our team building efforts as the site and administrative staff. So we began holding new board member orientations and implemented a day-long board of director retreat. As a result, the board now meets more frequently and with a purpose aligned to the shift in our culture. Overall, as an organization, we've made great progress, and our focus on a service mindset has helped us make that shift. Having the opportunity to work with such an amazing team, focusing on providing the necessary resources for each family in need, is a true inspiration and a blessing for us all. I hope that this helps give you an idea of our focus for today and maybe some inspiration for the challenging but critical work of creating systems change. Without further ado, I'm excited to present our final main stage session for this week, featuring Deputy Secretary of Education, Cindy Marten, along with CIS National Board Member and Executive Director of the American Association of School Administrators, Dan Domenech, moderated by our National President and CEO, Ray Saldana. Please join me in welcoming them to our virtual stage.
To introduce and to be in conversation with during this facilitated discussion. Again, my name is Ray Saldana, President and CEO of Communities in Schools. And this conversation, as you all know, is culminating the 3 days of networking and engaging in dialogues and learning around the opportunities that we all have as a network to truly think about elevating our work in this incredible moment, this moment that we can see whether as a moment of opportunity, but certainly a moment of crisis, and one that we're trying to grow through and learn and refine our model and continue the lifting up of the site coordinators and the staff working inside schools alongside principals and superintendents and teachers. And now that that school is officially underway across the country, we know that some schools are open for the very first time since the spring of 2020, while others are closing temporarily because of COVID outbreaks and because of the influx of resources through through ESSER being poured into districts through support of the federal government, and thinking through what opportunity that creates to dive deep and not only address the current crisis of the pandemic, but also provide support to the underlying challenges that really have faced many students well before COVID ever hit. So what's critical to point out is that many members of today's audience, whether executive directors or program staff, they've actually used the infusion of these resources. They've had these resources and an opportunity to expand, to dive deeper in the model, to get into more schools and to serve more students. And we think that the momentum created around the wraparound student services and supports that our students need, focusing attention on not just how to reopen to support COVID recovery, but thinking long-term about how we improve and we create equitable outcomes for the students that we serve. And so today we want to have a conversation around both the ways CIS can support the here and now and how we can set a vision for the future to truly create an equitable education system, that not be something that we lose sight of when we think about the disparities that we went through and who was hit the hardest. Those are the things that drive us as we think about having a conversation around public education and the future of our work. So today we have two great folks who are joining us in this conversation. First, we have Deputy Secretary Marten. And for folks who are familiar, just a great educator, 32 years in the making, was most recently San Diego Unified School District Superintendent since 2013. So knows the perspective of this work, now sitting in her perch at the Department of Education from a teacher's lens, a principal's lens, a literacy specialist's lens. And joining Deputy Secretary Marten in the conversation is Dan Domenech, who sits on our national board, but is also the executive director of AASA, the American Association of School Administrators. And I'm happy that we get to be part of this conversation because this is truly a pullback for us to think about the national perspective, think about the moment, the movement that is happening all around us, and we get to talk with leaders who are at the center of that. So let's go ahead, turn to our conversation. So Deputy Secretary, I'd like to start with you. As we start back into in-person learning across the country, and COVID still being a prevalent situation or still in our consciousness, many of our schools and communities, can you just share a little bit about the vision of the department in the immediate as we work to recover from the last year and a half of the pandemic, and how that's guiding work and your position now?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for just bringing us all together to have these important conversations. I've always said conversations matter, and being able to have a virtual fireside chat matters so that we can actually learn from each other and grow together. And, with this particular question, just you're right, we're starting back to in-person learning. It's going across the country. What's front and center in our minds here at the department? I just have to say we need to be honest with each other, and the 2021-2022 school year looks a little different than what we had all hoped it might look like. As we were planning for reopening, I was superintendent in San Diego Unified until recently, and all of the plans for reopening that were going forward, the planning that we did during the summer and the things, we saw like a little lull in the cases and an incredibly successful summer school programming that was happening. And then all of a sudden, this beginning of the school year wasn't exactly what we had hoped for, because the Delta variant, as everybody knows, along with the high levels of community transmission, and then there's been varying commitments from governors and localities to put forward the mitigation strategies that we know work. That's meant that students and communities, unfortunately, are continuing to experience this storm in very different ways. I often say that you hear people say we're all in the same boat together. We have to get through it. We have to do that. We're not all in the same boat. We're all in the same storm, but we've been in different boats. And so I guess that being said, here at the department, what we're committed to, the secretary and I and our whole team, is to ensuring that leaders and decision makers and all the local leaders are able to lead from a strengths-based perspective, so that they can ensure that all of the students have access to the highest quality educational experience possible. And that strength-based approach, using what we know works, finding the mitigations and the academic resources that are necessary, do it from a strengths-based perspective. And so let's talk about a couple of those strengths. Today, we do know more about the virus itself than we've ever known before. Planning for school or in-person learning a year ago was very different than planning now. Now we understand transmission, we understand the disparate impacts that are communities of color, our rural communities, and importantly, we know more about what the mitigation strategies do. We know now more than ever how we can use mitigation strategies to actually keep kids learning and the in-person learning systems that will work. And we have a lot of proof points. We have proof points from around the country, and we can see that when there's been a multi-layer mitigation approach, and the methods including vaccination for all eligible staff and students, masking, distancing, updating the HVAC systems, all of those things, we actually have data to show those have been incredibly successful in keeping the transmission down so kids can continue their learning. Like, let's take San Francisco, for example. They recently posted their report on 0 outbreaks as a result of the layered approach that includes masking and expedient contact tracing. The strategies work. And so what we want to do at the department is help states, districts, and schools take this increased knowledge that's out in the field and figure out ways to apply it so that you can keep your schools open and keep your students safe. It shouldn't be one or the other. You're open and you're not safe, or you're closed and you're safe. No, you can be open and you can be safe. And that's why there's more funding than ever before for the localities, so that they can implement the mitigation strategies in a way that makes the most sense for their communities and the risk profiles that they're dealing with. So what you'll see is the funding reflects our other deep commitment, besides safety, of course, which is always number one. The other deep commitment we have here at the department is equity. The requirements around ensuring that recovery efforts are purposefully targeted to disproportionately impacted communities means that we're including students with disabilities, language learners, students experiencing poverty. We've been very intentional to say we must ensure that the recovery efforts are focused and targeted so that those impacted the most get the greatest support. That's how we define equity. When we talk equity here at the department and across our country, is each and every student and community gets what he or she needs when they need it in the way that they need it. And our vision and the mission is set to us very clearly by our president. He's always been very clear. Ensure that students have the opportunity to learn where they're most successful, for the most of them, that's inside the classroom. And so in order to ensure student and staff have health and safety, we have to combat the virus together and ensure that in case of need of incidence response, the schools are able to mitigate and then curb the learning loss or disruption for instructional time. So I just have to say, we have the knowledge, we have the resources, we have the data to prove that this is possible, and we need to ensure that the leadership in every state, in every district, in every school is taking advantage of all that we've learned during the past many months.
Secretary Marten, let me first show a little bit of gratitude on behalf of our entire organization and educators who work, those educators we're working with. We know that not just in word, but in deed, the Department of Education has really stepped up to live up to public safety and equity, and even coming in to support those school districts and those school leaders who have held those values. And that has just been critical in a way that we loved to see as folks who are supporting the reopening of school. And you come from a perspective of somebody who was a school leader for at least 8 years at San Diego Unified. And so I want to turn now to Dan, who works with school leaders in San Diego, but also across the country, facing these incredible challenges, also incredible decisions. And Dan, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how leaders across the country are addressing the challenges that Secretary Marten has discussed and how that's affecting so many schools and children. So if you can touch on that, and what some examples you can think of or share of how leaders are stepping up to address the crisis we're facing.
Sure, Ray. Thank you very much for having us on this wonderful event. First of all, the last time that the Deputy Secretary and I were together was in person in early July. And this was at our advocacy conference, where we actually had in person over 300 superintendents from around the country over a period of a week. And at that point, we were all convinced, there was no question, that we were all convinced that July was just going to be a wonderful start to a school year where every child was going to be in the district in person, and it was going to be not necessarily a return to normal as we knew it, but certainly very different from the previous year. Well, things changed dramatically between July and by the time school districts started to open, many of them in August, and then just most recently in September. Because of the Delta variant, we have seen a spike where, as of the latest figures that I have seen, the number of children infected now are 5 times greater than back in July. And this is just at the time when we're beginning school again. So superintendents, our educational leaders were really had made plans that now those plans are changing dramatically because of what's going on. I have to thank the Deputy Secretary and our Secretary for the support that they are giving our leaders. Because what's happening out in the field is that what we're seeing that's very different from what we saw last year. Last year, there was no vaccine. Last year, basically, schools didn't start, many, till the latter part of the year. This year, the intent was for all schools to start in person. And the key things were that we have a vaccine and getting the students vaccinated. And we also know that second to the vaccine, the wearing of masks is important as well. But what we see happening throughout the country is that depending on where you live, depending on the area of the country that you're either in an area where the majority of the individuals are vaccinated and people are wearing masks, or you're not. So the difference between last year and this year is that I can tell you about school districts right now that are doing in-person work. The Deputy Secretary mentioned San Francisco. They're doing a great job. Los Angeles, they just announced the first really district in the country to announce that all students will need to be vaccinated. That's a great step in that direction. But the problem is that when we go to other areas of the countries where we have states that have mandates that say you can't wear a mask in school, or there is opposition to the vaccine. So this discrepancy that exists around the country between people that get vaccinated and wear masks and areas where they don't want to get vaccinated and not wear masks is the facts and the figures that you have to, if you don't believe in the science, then just look at the numbers. And you can see where schools are open in person successfully and where they're not, where they're having to shut down. So our superintendents are caught in this battle. I can tell you that I have not seen the number of superintendents that have left the profession this year in any year that I have been in this business, and I've been in this business 54 years, so quite a long time. Superintendents are retiring early. Superintendents are quitting their job because of the pressure that they're under. And a lot of superintendents are being fired because they are trying to be champions for the children in their schools and to do the right thing. And they get opposition from either their community or from their board members. So it's been a very difficult process. But again, you have my good friend Mike Hinojosa in Dallas, who, in spite of the fact of Texas governor saying you can't force kids to wear masks in schools, they have. He went out on a limb to say, yes, our children are going to wear a mask because I'm here to protect our children. We have other superintendents in Florida and other states, and the Secretary of Education came out and supporting those individuals. And were they saying, when those states were saying, we're going to cut your funding and we're going to cut the salary of the superintendent and boards of education, the secretary said, if they do that, we'll make it up with federal funding. So it's great to see. I can tell you that our leaders very much appreciate the kind of support, not just financial support. I mean, the American Rescue Plan, we've never seen this amount of dollars coming to school and the difference that that's making. But the stress that our superintendents, our principals, our teachers are under, given the division that exists within our country, is amazing. And getting the kind of support we've been getting from the department, from the deputy secretary, the secretary, and other folks in the department is very much appreciated. We thank you for that.
Dan, let me just say, you've been in this business for 54 years. For folks, Dan looks great, and he started this when he was 2 years old, just so folks know. He's still looking good. Dan, I think about what you've said and the kind of just the toughest job I think anybody in the country had last year was that of a school leader. And I think you walked us through how difficult that can be realistically about how to manage decisions, but also politically and the arrows being thrown in so many different directions. And I want to now talk about the support around school leaders, the support around some of the resources that have come into schools by transitioning the topic to think about the collaborative nature that this all needs to happen in. And we understand that this work needs to be part of a larger system that needs to be beyond just thinking about the narrow lane. Sometimes we think about that schools are handling one issue, the housing department is handling another, the food pantries are working through others. So as we think about collaboration, how are organizations, perhaps like CIS, playing a role in this work, or what role can an organization like Communities in Schools, nestled inside schools, navigating what can sometimes be a confusing system for students look like, and how that support? Maybe we'll start with you, Deputy Secretary Marten, about what that collaboration can look like.
Well, thank you for knowing how important collaboration is and lifting it up as a topic for us to discuss, because nothing happens when you do it by yourself. When you do it in collaboration, you do it in partnership with great organizations such as yours, and you actually care about asking that question, we know that it's super authentic, and that's how it's going to be meaningful, because it's truly organizations like CIS have an incredibly important role to play. I can say that wholeheartedly as a school principal who worked in an inner city school for 10 years and as a superintendent. You all support the service delivery model that we know works. You support data collection. You're able to help local areas add surge capacity in places where educators and leaders themselves, they need help. They need more hands, hearts, and minds to partner up together to get this work. And so I guess I'm thinking about a critical function that organizations like CIS can play in communities is that we need to keep in mind and be strategic when we do this, is that the role that you play is as a trusted partner, a navigator, and a lot of times your sources of information and sometimes comfort to families and teachers alike. The school tries to be comforting, provide supports, but also to have a trusted community partner that matters. So, like I mentioned, I was a principal at a school with 100% poverty, 1,000 kids, pre-kindergarten through 5th grade. And that school where I worked for 10 years in the inner city of San Diego, we had a majority language learning students. And I saw firsthand the power of community organizations to be the bridge, not only with information, but with trust and building trust and doing it together. So I really think it's important that organizations such as yours, that you all understand and you make yourselves like students of the all the mitigation risks that I just mentioned? Are you learning and understanding what mitigations are? What are the things that are working out there? And have you become students of the science and of the networks? Do you understand all the facts that are out there around health and safety, so that as an organization, it's important that you all are giving an accurate, timely, and scientifically backed set of information as a trusted partner or resource that the community might turn to? Like, they hear something on the TV, or they hear their principal or their teacher say something, and then when it gets validated and said again by another organization where they're shopping around the science or shopping around the facts, you become students of that, so that you're helping to give out this accurate, timely information and making yourselves truly available, so that families and students have, they're looking for true partners. And you're doing that in the schools that you're supporting, because I just have to say, it's possible, and unfortunately in some places maybe likely, that the community is going to turn to you for validation. I mean, of course, we always want them to turn to the principal and the teachers, but sometimes they're going to turn to organizations such as yours to validate the information and look for guidance when they hear someone like me on CNN or on Twitter or in a press conference. They hear the secretary saying something, or they read something in an email from their daily life that's like, I heard it's this, that might give them information. They're going to turn to you. And so I just have to think that our recovery efforts and President Biden's Build Back Better agenda, it applies to groups like CIS as well. The Department of Education, you've heard the Secretary many times say, we're a service agency. Dan, I appreciate you saying thank you, that we're here for you, because we truly mean it. We're a service agency to students and educators and families, and to groups like CIS as well. We're committed to partnering with organizations like yours to make your work easier, to ensure that we're in alignment in our goal and the president's goal of having government help all American people. So you become part of that ecosystem of Building Back Better. To make this recovery possible, to make Build Back Better actually work, these efforts need to be felt in every town, in every city, in every state around the country. So every American has the ability to feel how we're here to work for them. And so I see you guys at the forefront in this collaborative model. You're at the forefront of implementing evidence-based interventions that come from sources like the Department of Education, HHS, the CDC. We know the power of groups that have the deep community connections, because you all can build the trust and help communities take wise action. And we see it in voting patterns. We've seen it in vaccination rates. So you take your role as an information sharer and as a partner of the federal and state efforts, and you end up becoming an influencer in your communities, and the communities begin to take these sometimes far away federal information sources, and you put it on the ground and you help people take it seriously. So I just think when you all have the opportunity to influence decision making, take it, but always keep the real people that you're representing at the forefront of your work. And when you're making asks, keep the people that you serve at the forefront of that. That's how you keep the trust that you've built, and that's how we can stay in meaningful relation and collaboration with one another.
Deputy Secretary, I want to hold in the middle of this conversation as I pass it to Dan something that's important. It's bringing in the thoughts and the vision of our founder, who originally believed that the way that we change or we impact students' lives, it's not because of a program. It's really relationships that are being established between a caring adult and a child, and our program and our organization really just creates those conditions for those relationships to thrive and that trust to thrive. And the vision of our founder was to think about CIS, communities and schools, and a psych coordinator in every Title I school in the country. And that's actually looking to be more clear now, with support for the DOE, with support from state offices. So I wonder, Dan, you know our model better than a lot of folks because you've sat on our board and you understand the work real time. So how do you think, as an organization, CIS lives into this moment, and what role it could play as we think about the comments Deputy Secretary made about building back to better?
Well, thank you, Ray. You were talking about our founder, Bill Milliken. It was Bill Milliken 21 years ago who cornered me into having lunch with him. And next thing I knew, I was the chairman of the CIS board for Virginia. And next thing I knew, I was on the national board of CIS So I confess that I have been affiliated with CIS for over 20 years. But the reason that I am affiliated with CIS is because as superintendent of schools in Fairfax County, Virginia, I immediately recognized the integrated support services, which is what CIS is about. Long before, and by the way, I am so happy, and I'm sure Cindy is as well, because I know how child-oriented she is. I am so delighted to see that this, one of the results of this pandemic, is for people to turn to other than the academic needs of students and begin to realize how important their social and emotional needs are. Okay, this has now become a major factor, even among superintendents, principals, and teachers alike. They recognize that when a child comes to school now, the first thing you're going to do is not open the page 45 of your math book, but how are you? How is your family? How have you fared through this process? Understanding that if we don't deal with the needs of the child, other than the academic needs, the academic will never happen. They're not going to learn. I mean, those are facts that are proven. Linda Darling-Hammond does great work in that particular area. We know that to be a fact. That's what CIS does. During this past year, when children were absent and children were lost and children needed food and children needed attention, who did that? The coordinators in our CIS schools. They were the ones that went out to these children when the children could not be in the school. They're the ones that when we bring those children back are going to be able to bring to the school all the support services that they need. That's the work that CIS has been doing for years. And that's why it's so important. And I'm delighted to see that the current funding under ARP deliberately identifies funds for community-based agencies like CIS. So it's a very, very important process. It's great work. I want to commend the folks in the audience that are so involved with CIS and really doing this great work. Because let me tell you, the job that you do, the work that you do is needed today more than ever. Thank you so much for what you do.
Dan, thank you so much for walking us through that and for also wrapping us in the kind of gratitude that I want to reemphasize for those who are listening in, because they are program managers or site coordinators or executive directors who have been working in San Antonio or Los Angeles or Houston or New Orleans or Atlanta or West Virginia. And it is their work that I think is really going beyond the wall that some of these students will be putting up as we re-enter this environment. And I want to just maybe continue the conversation, Deputy Secretary Marten, if you'll walk us through, because you have this great vantage point of having so much practitioner knowledge, and now you're working to really envision a future from a national perspective of what public education is going to look like in a post-pandemic and what schooling is going to look like. So I wonder, as you and the Secretary and the rest of the staff who are considering how you all come in to support, what the priorities of the department to build the next phase of the education, to create equitable education environments for all students, and as you said, to build back better, what those priorities look like.
There's really nothing that is more important than us thinking about what the future is going to be, which is hard to do when you're so mired in what's happening right now. But we have to be able to do both. And there's a ability to act with urgency and patience at the same time. And thinking about that future, being a futurist and casting a vision, we've all experienced something that in our lifetimes we've never experienced before. And so when we're imagining this post-pandemic schooling, I have a sign behind me that says dream big. I used to teach the kids in the inner city school to dream big. And dreaming big is about beyond what you currently have. Don't just go with what you know. Like there's things that, how do you aspire to a career you never knew existed before? What does it mean to be aspirational? And so when I think about this, like I spent every waking and probably sleeping moment thinking about this. And there's only one real answer to this. We must put equity at the center of all of the work that we're doing to reopen safely. I've been a true equity warrior and leader for my whole career. And now there is no other way forward than to understand what equity truly looks like. We have to use the unprecedented investments that we're seeing in the American Rescue Plan to address the gaps that have already been there. These gaps have only been exacerbated by the pandemic, and we've got to find the ways to target the resources to the communities that need it the most. We have to prioritize this intentional collaboration and we have to work collectively so we can build trust in the historically underserved and under-resourced communities. I can't tell you how many times in my career I've seen great process, I've seen great work with students. Even in my 8 years as superintendent with schools being horribly underfunded, you get a solution that works and you can't replicate it and take it to scale because there's a funding cap to it. There was like this worked, if only we could do more of it. Well, now we can. And this is our job, this is our moment. At this time, we must build back better. And it's our time to not just fix the things that were broken, but get at the root causes and solve them once and for all. Find out the things that were not working in our educational systems before March of 2020 in your local community and go after it. Go after it and don't let up, because now is the moment. And the children, you know what? They're waiting for us. This pandemic was not their fault, but our building back better is ours to lead. So I want to think about how, when we move forward and we work towards the hope and the promise of American education in our country, which is what drives me every day of my life, I want to make sure we're focused on establishing a new baseline for our students. Let's ensure that recovery from the pandemic and addressing learning loss is purposeful and equitable. Let's make sure we're providing every student with what they need, when they need it, in the way that they need it. And let's not assume somebody outside knowing that student has the answer. The real answers are closest to the children. Do not import solutions from the outside and somebody has some silver bullet, like here's what you need to do for every child in America to recover. No, it's local. Know your children, know your families, know your communities, and make purposeful, intentional, equitable use of this money. And then another thing is, let's ensure that every single student, no matter their background, no matter their zip code, no matter their circumstance, make sure that they get the high quality education that they deserve to be able to achieve their dreams. That includes students with disabilities, multilingual learners, any student with special needs. And let's reimagine college and career pathways. I can talk K-12 all day long, but let's look at the college and career pathways and make sure higher education is more accessible and more affordable than ever before. And I have to say something about respecting the teaching profession. Teachers, obviously, I'm a lifelong teacher. Dan, I'm sorry I don't have 56 years, but I've got 32 years in. And respecting the teachers in our country and building a strong, diverse teacher pipeline is so important. The teaching workforce has always mattered, matters now more than it ever has before. And so when we're doing this, and I'm imagining the future, how are we prioritizing equity in student access to educational resources and the opportunities that create the warm, safe, welcoming environments that we know our students deserve? So I think to get there, we have to encourage the efforts that we see to provide professional learning for educational leaders, and we have to eliminate any of those barriers that are out there that contribute to student opportunity and to the achievement gaps. And then finally, I guess I have to say, you'll hear the secretary say it often as well, we see ourselves as a nation, there's as a whole and as an individual, we are healing, we are learning, and we are growing together. We take an inquiry stance, we take a human stance to this, and we think creatively about how to make these investments in innovation in our classroom and our communities be the long-term sustainable kinds of work that was a long time coming. The time is now. We are the ones that our children have been waiting for. This is our time to build it right.
Deputy Secretary, thank you for walking us through what is just, I hope for folks who are listening into this, just great alignment with a lot of the values that we believe as a small part of the great work that needs to happen around teachers and the support of our school climates and the center of equity that we have as an organization for 44 years being built with a foundation of justice, what that looks for those who have been too often overlooked or left behind. And we're excited about what the influx of support from the Department of Education through ARP, through emergency relief, will really allow us to put on the ground. And I think it's that question, Dan, that I want to pass to you, which is now that we have this influx of resources in districts, we have school district and superintendents who have to make important decisions. And they are also thinking about what can be sustained long term, what can we pilot and try, and what can we even pick up locally. If the Department of Education is supporting this work for the next few years, what can we really prove out to demonstrate long-term impact? And so I want to ask you what those conversations are sounding like with some of the school leaders you can connect with.
Well, we see this as a great opportunity, really. The pandemic has allowed really the ability to think about not going back to what it used to be, but moving forward to what it should be. And the resources are there that school districts have never had before. So what we're looking and focusing on, and we see ourselves at ASA, the School Superintendent's Organization, as facilitators in a process to work towards a student-centered, equity-focused system of education. Student-centered and equity-focused. And equity is a key word. You know, this past year, going back to the summer before last, we witnessed the huge inequity that all of us in education have always been aware of, but apparently the public in general not. For example, we saw that throughout this past year, there were over 14 billion of our students in poverty that did not have access to a computer and did not have access to the internet services at home. Okay, and for the better part of the year, many of those students were missing, and many of those students were getting no education at all. Thanks to the American Rescue Plan dollars now, we've seen that school districts have been able to purchase to ensure that every student does have a computer. And through the Federal Communications Commission, about $7.5 billion, that families that can't afford internet access are getting internet access. So that's a huge step in the right direction. But we have to move on from here, and we have to acknowledge the fact that for years, many of our students have not received the kind of quality education that they are entitled to. And the way to do that is to move forward, to change the way that we do things, to make our educational system not exclusive, but inclusive. There's a big difference there. And we see that when we go to school districts that don't have the resources, don't have the ability, don't have the capacity to provide their children in their communities with the kind of education that other children are getting. So this is a great opportunity to do that. And what we are focusing on is action. So what we have done is that we have identified over 100 school districts around the country where the superintendents believe that this change can happen. And they've come on board to begin developing and working in their districts the opportunities for all children to learn, to ensure that no child is marginalized, as so many children are, and that all of them are getting the opportunity that they need. So we are at a point in time where there are tremendous opportunities where things can happen. Our leaders are ready to move forward. The resources are there. We are monitoring how school districts around the country are using those ARP dollars and ensuring that, yes, it's important to deal with facilities. Yes, it's important to deal with the quality of air and all of these things. But it's also important to make sure that children are getting the services that they need to have, that the counselors are there, the social workers are there, that the food is there, that the situation at home is being addressed, that programs like CIS are being brought into the schools to work and partner on doing these programs. So it's a great opportunity. I hope that we don't waste it. We are doing everything that we can to work and cooperate, by the way, with other organizations, the principal groups, the parents groups, the boards of education, the chief state school officers, the Department of Education, that together we can move forward the agenda and ensure that after this is all over, we're not going back to schools as they were, but schools as they will be.
Dan, I want to thank you for just reminding us about something that's important, which is something that Deputy Secretary Marten described. And I'm so grateful that both of you as leaders are in positions to recall this, which is sometimes the greatest danger to progress or to building out in a better way is a short-term memory and forgetting about the things that we felt so passionately about when we were going through the difficult time a year ago, or to forget about the history of what has happened in some of our public institutions where we have left some people out. And Deputy Secretary, I just want to give you the final word on this. You've given us so many great nuggets throughout the conversation, that about the role that we have at CIS as trusted partners, the role of equity in the center it will play in the conversation of the Department of Education. So Just any final word you have in this audience, dedicated staff working inside schools alongside our teachers and principals, any advice you have for a network like ours that is thinking about the work ahead and the challenge we have to step up to meet the moment?
Well, it's great to know that it's such a beautiful network and that you're wanting to engage in how can we really help? You're very much with the service heart, and I appreciate that. Um, and I should have said at the beginning of the call, please call me Cindy, because Deputy Secretary Marten is like way too many words and syllables. And I usually say it at the beginning, please just call me Cindy. It's a lot easier to get that like 2 syllables out instead of like 1,400. But anyway, like, thank you for letting me say a couple of things about what you can do, and that service heart that you all have in your network is just so important. And I know what you're committed to is sustaining the work. And so I just have two key things. The first is remember your charge. And the second is remember your audience. There's an unprecedented amount of funding right now. I know you know that. And there's an unprecedented amount of need for your expertise and for your support. And so what I ask is that, I mean, you're going to do it naturally because it's who you are as an organization, but be good stewards of both of those things. Remember to work in true partnership with your districts and your communities and develop and implement plans and programs that are aligned to the district's goals and obligations, and understand the limitations and what their hopes and dreams are, but be in partnership with them on that. Just remember that it's a two-way street. When we say that government and communities should work together, we mean that the most successful groups fill gaps, meet demands, consider teachers, principals, counselors, school nurses, all of that, the lunch ladies, like consider everybody and make it part of the whole ecosystem, and know that understand the community that you're serving, and make sure that parents and students are part of it as well. The way I used to say it as superintendent and as principal is, when a community group comes in to help, make sure that you're not doing something to a school community or for a school community. You're doing it with them. Whenever you do something to somebody or for somebody, as good as it is, as well-intentioned as it is, it's disempowering and disenfranchising. When you do it with somebody and you understand their hopes and dreams and goals and desires, it's always the most important. And then just remember that the current funding streams under the CARES Act and the American Rescue Plan and other emergency funding streams, remember they're just that. They're emergency funds. They will help communities to meet needs and drive equity as we recover and beyond. But the next step in sustainability is ensuring that the president's Build Back Better agenda is implemented to cement this work for generations to come. This isn't just an emergency. We got a bunch of money and we met the emergency. This is long-term for generations to come, and understand that's the work that you're part of. The Build Back Better agenda is a once-in-a-generation investment. And it's an investment in the foundation of the middle class prosperity, in education, healthcare, and childcare. All of the basic needs that you're addressing are in this question. I mean, it just proposes this transformational investment in education. And it's going to help our communities recover from the pandemic. It's going to help everybody rebuild. And it's going to provide every student what they need to succeed in a global economy. You know that the president has boldly proposed the Build Back Better agenda to build on the recovery efforts so that we can reinvigorate education to support families. And it's now and for the future. So I would say that it needs your support so that our recovery efforts are just the beginning of prosperity for our children and for future generations. And this moment is used not just for the emergency response, but for long term. And for those of you who might say, oh, the work I do isn't political, I'm not involved in anything like that, I will just propose to you that the work you're doing will be the most powerful proof point for investing in our schools and our students and our teachers and all of the wraparound services that we know matter and that they're going to need for the long term. You all are incredible ambassadors for what happens when we have the opportunity to work from a position of opportunity rather than from one of scarcity. For so many years, it's scarcity. We haven't had enough. We have enough. I want to encourage you to become fervent advocates at the state and federal level for your communities that are so beloved to you and the work that you do. There's a great opportunity here. Let's do this together.
Well, you heard it from, and I'm going to labor to say this, from Cindy, Deputy Secretary Marten. You heard it straight from Deputy Secretary Marten, from Cindy, thinking about something that to be bold and also not forget who you are and where you come from. And I think I'm delighted. I didn't mention this, but I'm a product of the program, found the program Communities in Schools through my site coordinator in San Antonio. And in that way, what we do is find folks who are from the community who can support lifting up the community in that way. And I think that's so great and such a great way to wrap up this conversation about being bold and not forgetting who you are and what role you can play. And I know that our network is well versed in what it's like to advocate for our students, and we've engaged in stepping up to really meet this demand from school districts all across the country in an effort to provide the kind of vital supports as we begin to recover and really just imagine what it looks like and truly build back to better, as Cindy was saying. So it would be just wonderful if we can continue this conversation. And I know that we've got strong champions of the Department of Education, really the Department of Opportunity, because this really is the chance that we get to work with the DOE to really build out what these equitable systems for our students are. So I want to thank Dan Domenech and Deputy Secretary Cindy Marten for their time and their wisdom in joining us for this conversation. Grateful to have leaders that will work alongside us to empower the next generation. And with that, thank you again so much for joining us in this conversation. And we look forward to a continued effort to stay all in for kids.
Well, that was a great conversation. Thank you, Ray, for moderating. I really enjoyed hearing about the department's vision for supporting us. And I think it was just amazing of how we move beyond the pandemic. One thing that really resonated with me was that we have all known that most schools haven't been able to support students fully in the past. However, now that there is an influx of funding, we must continue forward to what it should be.
Absolutely, Donna, and I'm so grateful that you and I get to spend a little time together. It was, in fact, that influx is something close to 123, so close to $130 billion. And I know that I found it just so helpful to see how CIS is aligned so well with the Department of Education's vision, and hopefully we can continue to activate on those opportunities. I just appreciate their focus on centering equity, and that it's their priority for recovery efforts. And it gives me a moment really just to shout out those affiliates who are really taking advantage of the American Rescue Plan dollars. As complicated as it can be, there are a few affiliates who are leading the way, who also, I'm sure, are more than welcoming the support of other affiliates who reach out to them. So I'm thinking of CIS of Gulf South in New Orleans, Lafayette and Baton Rouge. They hope to expand to 13 schools, providing integrated student support with close to $900,000 worth of ARP funding. CIS of Washington, CIS of Nevada, which hopes to expand from 80 to 118 schools over the next 3 years, and CIS of Southeast Texas, just outside of Houston, which is hoping to expand to 22 schools with approximately $2 million worth of the American Rescue Plan funding. So it is just a number of great points that Deputy Secretary Marten discussed that we are getting to directly take advantage of because of the Department of Education's not just support at the nationwide level, but specifically calling out CIS. And hearing Deputy Secretary say that we have to put equity front and center so that we can build trust really made me think about what CIS does every single day. I know that this is something we already do well. We build trust with students, families, and communities.
Oh, I completely agree. She kept pointing back to being local and that the experts are those are in the lives of kids who know them the very best. I really respected what the Deputy Secretary said when she pointed that out. We are the ones our children have been waiting for. The time is now. It was such a great reminder and a motivator during such a difficult time.
I do hope that the whole network is thinking about themselves, and the site coordinators are thinking about themselves when she said that. It's so true. And it's been an incredibly just hard 18 months. And I've been honored to really get to dive deep in with the network. And I know that this year isn't going to be easy, but just so grateful for leaders like you, Donna, who keep showing us the way and keep showing up. Our network is stronger because of how we stayed connected with one another, which is why weeks like this just can be so powerful.
Well, thank you so much. It has been this week has just been amazing the way we have been able to just reconnect and get together and just see how strong we really are as such a strong team. So, well, speaking of connection, did you know that the learning doesn't have to stop today? Leaders, please check out the connectivity calendar in your briefcase on the platform for details of when you can connect with other leaders in our network on various topics throughout the school year. I always benefit from being in relationships with other CIS leaders. Wow. Well, Ray, I think we've made it to the end of such a successful week. Thank you so much for having me. I know I can speak for my fellow co-host and say we really had a blast and enjoyed being a virtual MCs this week. Thank you. And thank you to all of you that made this week possible. Take it away, Ray.
Donna, thank you so much. As one of our executive directors and leaders in Texas, we know you have an incredible job. And at the beginning of the year, you also are incredibly busy. So thank you for hosting along with our hosts who have been part of this conversation. And as I think back on the week, we've covered a lot of ground. And I hope that you found the content helpful as you go back to your offices and continue to, as our theme has been, mobilize, activate, and lead, maybe even in some new ways that we haven't yet talked about over the last 3 days. I really just want to go back to a concept. We talked about it in one of our main stage panels on Tuesday, which was examining the racial justice movement and the role for CIS. I quoted the poet Alice Walker that the most common way we give away our power is by thinking that we don't have it. You have an incredible amount of power. Please don't give it away. And don't forget who you are, where you come from, and who we work for. Our students need advocates, and they need your voice as you mobilize, activate, and lead. We go at the pace that you set for us, and we're just excited as we think about the conversations that we have stepped into over the last few days. And it was just incredibly important. Yesterday, as I think about the leaders like Donna, we had the chance to recognize our leadership when we recognized the executive directors who have stepped into this incredible last 18 months, but also this incredibly difficult challenge that will be not just this next school year, but the next decade we have of really building out CIS when we look back 10 years from now to see the work and the foundation that we've put in over the last 44 years truly meeting its moment. And as the executive directors, we know that's been a hard year for you, and we deeply appreciate you. And as we have honored and awarded all executive directors this year, I hope you know that if you haven't yet received it, an award will be coming to your office in the mail. And I also just love highlighting the amazing partners like JCPenney, who have been stepping up as our corporate partners. And we got to honor and celebrate alums like Cyril, who continue to motivate me for this coming year, but continue to motivate this balance of the work that we have ahead to support our alumni and build out an infrastructure that truly meets our mission. It's been said so many times, especially during the conversations yesterday around alumni, that we do have a responsibility not just to ensure that we are surrounding students and surrounding them with the community support to succeed in school, but also to achieve in life. I'm also eager to just be in person with you all. And we know that as we think through the 45th Leadership Town Hall that we are exiting, please be on the lookout for details coming soon about when and where we will be headed in 2022. And maybe we can have an actual dance party instead of one in our offices, sometimes with shoes or without shoes. But although we can't see the future, I know that we can navigate it together. And I hope that it is in person together in the future. So I would be remiss if we closed out without thanking a few people first. I want to thank our amazing hosts, Elizabeth Hodges from CIS of Seattle, Hope Sinclair from CIS of Hampton Roads, and Donna Montes from CIS of Southeast Harris and Brazoria County. Yeah, were so much fun and kept us moving. Thank you for helping us pull this event off. And I want to also thank our board of directors all across the network, and specifically to our board chair at the national office, Elaine Wynn, and our national board members, who include our founder, Bill Milliken, and Bill, who is eager to be in person this time next year as well. I appreciate the board's time and their dedication and support of the vision for our work across the network, especially as we respond to not just the crisis of the last 18 months, but the crisis ahead of us, to make sure that we are rebuilding, reimagining school to be equity focused to support all students. So thank you to the staff, again, who was rolling up their sleeves and rolled with the punches and prioritized the network's learning throughout the last few years, the last 18 months, and then to put together the great content that we had for you the last 3 days. So thank you to our presenters, our panelists, and the moderators who helped deliver great content. And lastly, thank you to all of you who participated, engaged, and showed up to grow and to learn. You continue to show what it means to be all in for kids. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.